Taking all these factors into consideration, real GDP growth for this year is now projected at 6.6%. We had earlier projected 6.9%, of course, with huge uncertainty and downside risks. With Q1 now projected at 6.6%, Q2 at 6.3%, Q3 at 6.5%, and Q4 at 6.8%. Prolonged global supply chain disruptions, volatility in global financial markets, and weather-related shocks continue to pose downside risks to the domestic growth outlook. Although firming up marginally from 3.2% in February, headline CPI inflation was below the target during both March and April this year. In fact, 3.4% and 3.5% respectively. While food inflation edged up, fuel inflation remained muted as retail prices of petrol and diesel were unchanged in March and April. Core inflation remained stable at 3.7% during March and April. Excluding precious metals, core inflation was much lower at about 2.1 to 2.2% during this same period. International crude oil prices, the Indian basket, have averaged around 110 US dollars per barrel during the last 2 months. And indications are that the average oil prices for this year would be substantially higher than what were assumed during the last policy. You may recall that in the last policy we had assumed crude oil prices to average for this year at $85 per barrel. Higher energy prices and an increase in several input prices also led to a sharp spike in WPI inflation in April, which was more than 8%. Turning to the inflation outlook, the partial pass-through of high global crude oil prices to domestic pump prices of petrol and diesel started in May. Prices of several inputs such as commercial LPG, industrial raw materials, chemicals, base metals, rubber, and plastic products, among others, have increased. These could exert upward pressure on CPI inflation in the coming months as firms pass on these higher input costs. Considering all these factors, CPI inflation for this year now is projected to be at 5.1%, about 50 basis points more than earlier projected, with Q1 at 4.2%, Q2 at 5.1%, Q3 at 5.9%, and Q4 at 5.4%. Core inflation is projected at 4.7% for this year.